Brighton have had an excellent start to life under the youngest manager in Premier League history, Fabian Hurzeler. In this video, we dissect a thrilling encounter with Manchester United, analysing Hurzeler's high line, the risk versus reward element of Brighton's system, and why Minter and Mitoma will put up great numbers this season. These are the big talking points from the game. Alright, let's get into it then. I want to start by having a look at Brighton's out of possession football, their pressing structure, what they're doing off the ball, and how that was both positive and detrimental to Brighton, because it's a nice mix of risk and reward playing a high line, similar to how Unai Emery plays. We've seen that quite a lot in the Premier League, haven't we?
Yeah, definitely so, and I think it's always a conundrum that managers sometimes get wrong, sometimes don't. I think obviously some managers like to go for the big risk. I mean, Ange Postecoglou loves to stick with his high line even if they've got 9 players on the pitch, but I think it's one of those where if you can nail it, if you can get it right, you get maximum reward out of it, even with taking that big risk. And that's a thing that I think Hurzeler will develop. He's new to the Premier League, he will get used to it. But as we saw on Saturday, there are still a few things to iron out.
Yeah, however, I would say on the surface it looks very positive. They've drawn 13 offsides in 2 matches, which is ridiculously high. 7 against Everton, 6 against Manchester United. To put that in perspective, the highest a Ten Hag Man United side has had was 3 against an Aston Villa team. Obviously, Villa are famed for playing this incredibly high line. They're the gold standard for high lines in the Premier League. So I think in that regard, clearly the high line is working for Hurzeler. So let's analyse it then. So as you can see, I've laid out how Manchester United were building up in their 4-2-4 type shape, which I think has had some success this season, but there's definitely some elements that I don't think are working at the moment. I don't think they're able to get those central players into the game enough, and that is a huge issue. But there are elements that are working. So if we look at how Brighton were pressing this, then when Onana would have the ball, Welbeck would push onto that right centre half, and this forces a left-hand side build-up. This means Onana has to go either long or to the left-hand side. Now, obviously, I think what United did well was realise they weren't going to be able to build up after a while and started going long, and that's when they started to have success. But at least in the early stages, this is generally how it would look. They'd play it out to that left centre half, out to the left back, and that's how they look. So, yeah, the big interesting thing, the reason this is so aggressive is that they had 7 players for Brighton were pressing against only 6 United players in build-up. And then obviously you have a back 3 on a 4. So if you look at the thing on screen now, Joel Veltman, number 34, has pushed up onto Diego Dallo. Now that's a really interesting tactical thing because it's very rare we see a right back push up onto their left back. So that's very aggressive. Minter would come inside, and then Mitoma as well dropping in, and it leaves you with a 3-on-4 situation in your back line. Now, a team that's as transitional as Man United should have had so much joy, and once the game opened up a bit more, they did have a lot of joy counter-attacking. Because as you can see, number 16, Amad Diallo, in absolute acres there, should be someone they can pick out quite easily, right?
Yeah, definitely so. And I mean, it's bizarre because you'd think that it's one of those weird ones where you'd think, as you say, it'd be so easy just to play out of it, play it to the bloke who stood in acres of space, and then suddenly you're through it all. But it doesn't fall out that way, and that's where Hurts has kind of got that gamble right. Is that for some reason that ball cannot get to Diallo, so there is no real problem with bringing Veltman forwards.
Yeah, and then obviously they leave a 3-on-4 situation in the back line, which is not even player for player, but it is at least on the right-hand side player for player. But you've got Dunk, who is huge and physical, up against Bruno Fernandes. You've got Josh Hinchelwood against Mason Mount, which Hinchelwood will win that battle. That's the only battle I think in the league he does win. Yeah. He's not a hugely physical player. And then you've got Van Hecke up against Rashford, which is a foregone conclusion with how physical Van Hecke is. So, yeah, so as we can see here, as Minter triggers that press onto the left centre half when Martinez has the ball, Martinez then has to push that ball out wide. And you can already see how United don't really have many options. I really like the run that Mainu makes, and I will point that out because I think that was quite effective. You see him drive forward in space, and that does open the pass up into Casemiro. And if we go to that screen now, you can see Casemiro picking up that ball, and then he moves it out to Mazraoui as they look to switch the play. Because there's no space down the left-hand side, because Veltman is on Dallo, and then he can't go up the line because of Veltman there, so he can't go and find Rashford. So they look to switch the play. They go for the midfield, find Mazraoui on the other side. But what Brighton do really effectively is that they come back across. Joel Veltman slots back into right back. We see Josh Hinchelwood go out to Amad Diallo. So even when Diallo does then receive the ball, it leaves him in a one-on-one against Josh Hinchelwood, which he can't really do anything with. You're relying on individual quality again there for United because you need Diallo to beat Hinchelwood in that one-on-one, and eventually they started to open up some space in the back line by playing over it, by playing around it. But at least in those initial stages, they're really struggling, United, to get through Brighton. But yeah, Brighton defended those wide areas really well, and then they couldn't get balls. United couldn't get balls into Mount and Fernandes. So in those early stages, we didn't really see a whole lot of shots. The first half numbers were quite low. However, this system can leave Brighton very vulnerable to the transitions, and we know that Ten Hag does seem to favour a transitional style of play, similar to how Jurgen Klopp would play. And if you remember perhaps that 10th minute opportunity, it felt like United found a breakthrough. That was when Onana went long to Dalot, who won that aerial duel against Veltman, then put in a brilliant cross to Diallo, and Diallo really should have scored that. But firstly, Dalot, what a cross.
I mean, yeah, that was a brilliant ball in, and
on his weak foot as well.
Yeah, on his weak foot. I was very surprised. I think Ali McCoy was very happy with it as well on commentary. But I mean, that was a huge chance. In the nature of the game, tactics aside, that realistically Brighton were caught out, and Manchester United should have punished it, because as we saw as the game went on, if you don't punish your chances against teams that set up so well, you're not going to get many more after that. And that was a waste for United. They found a way to get through the Hurzeler press and the Brighton setup, and they didn't take advantage of it. And that was costly come the end of the game.
Yeah, and we started to see in the first half more chances come. I think a lot of that was down to Bruno Fernandes. He stopped playing as this out-and-out striker and started dropping into midfield, started getting on the ball a bit more and creating more opportunities. I think that definitely helped them. And they obviously noticed that and made the change at half-time. So at half-time, Joshua Zirkzee on at 4, Mason Mount, I believe, and then obviously Fernandes dropped deeper into midfield. Now, that was a huge improvement in the side, because it meant that suddenly they've got a big physical striker. So you've got some aerial threat unless you can go long and actually challenge Dunk. You've also got someone who can hold the ball up and bring other players into the game. So they could go direct into his feet rather than looking for runs in behind. Yeah. So they can go direct into Zirkzee, and then Zirkzee can bring others into the play. And that made them able to pull Brighton apart a bit more, break them down a bit easier. So they definitely look better in those sorts of areas. I think Fernandes dropping deeper as well helps them in that build-up, because they don't really have a whole lot of creativity in there. They've got Casemiro, who doesn't really pass. They've got Mainu, who didn't have a whole load of touches because he was making the movement to find passes into other players to draw space for players like Casemiro. So definitely think, I mean, they've been linked with Ugarte a lot this window, but he has now got a medical, I believe, today for a £60 million move, which is pricey. But I think he would help them massively, because he's a player who can move the ball a bit more comfortably than Casemiro. He also defends large spaces, so that will help them in transition, which I think they do get hit quite hard in those areas. But what we did see in that second half was Casemiro dropping into between the centre-halves to receive the ball, which is quite an interesting thing. It meant the centre-halves could go wide, it meant the full-backs could push up. I think that was definitely better for Manchester United once that happened. And yeah, it seemed like by bringing Zirkzee on, they seemed so much better. And you've got to think that with Liverpool coming up this weekend, will Josh Zirkzee start?
Yeah, I mean, I think for United's sake, they'll be hoping that he can, because obviously, I mean, he came off the bench against Fulham, scored the opener, scored the winner. It was a well-taken effort. And yeah, as you say, he came on in this game and he made a positive impact. And that's a new striker. He scored a goal in his first game. He made a good impact in his second game. For me, he should be one of the first names on the team sheet for your next game. And I would be very surprised if he was on the bench again. And I think Zirkzee would be very surprised if he was on the bench again. So hopefully, for Zirkzee's sake, for United's sake, Ten Hag does see that and does opt to play Zirkzee. Yeah, and he did prevent a goal for Alejandro Garnacho, but he did well to get into that sort of position. And let's talk about the other element of United being better in the second half, or well, different in the second half, was Brighton losing control, which I think was both a benefit and obviously a detriment. I think that it opened the game up a lot more, which meant they were having more attacks, but it also meant United were having more attacks, more clear-cut opportunities. In fact, Hurzeler even said so himself. He said, we lost a little control, the game was too open, and that's one of the biggest strengths for United is good transitions. It was lucky we didn't concede the second goal. So I think in that regard, he's noticing that they were a bit too open, they were a bit too aggressive. And if you look at the first half statistics compared to the second half, so we'll show the first half statistics now. 47% possession to 53% in the favour of Manchester United, 0.81 XG to 0.44, 3 shots to 5 shots. Quite a cagey affair, only 8 shots in the first half. And obviously United missed that big chance, Brighton didn't. That's the key difference between the two sides. I think that was the Diallo chance for United. Didn't go in, obviously.
the Welbeck chance, the Welbeck goal for Brighton, which we'll talk about briefly. Terrible defending from Manchester United, but a well-taken goal for Brighton.
Yeah, it was a well-worked move, and Welbeck again getting on the score sheet. He's looking to have a bit of a tidy season this campaign, and he's off to a good start. But yeah, United were an absolute shambles at the back. There was many people that could have dealt with the ball, and they didn't, and Brighton took advantage of that.
Yeah, and then as we look at the second half statistics, the possession was 50-50, which you think, well, Brighton have had more of the ball, so sure, that means more control. But by the stats, they clearly didn't. Yes, their XG was, everything was still high. Brighton were the better side in the second half. I think they're the better side across the game.
Yeah.
But 1.2 XG to 0.99 showed both teams had chances. They went from 8 shots combined in the first half to 16 in the second half, so that doubled. 11 shots for Brighton, 5 for Manchester United. The key difference is that only one of United's shots was on target. And that was, of course, the goal for United. But 4 of Brighton's were. And for me, that's such a big difference. The fact that they had 6 more shots, 3 more on target. United just lack clinicality in front of goal, whereas Brighton were surgical in those areas. They were so precise. So, yeah, I think Brighton did really well. And obviously, they didn't miss a big chance. Manchester United did. And that's another key difference.
I think the fact that João Pedro scored the winner in the 95th minute makes the game look a little bit closer than it actually was. Because, as you say, the game obviously was very open second half, and Hurzeler feels that that Brighton got away with it. But when you look at the base statistics, Brighton were better in every department. So I do feel that Pedro's goal could have come at any time that second half. Just because it came so late on, it feels like that classic Brighton have snatched a victory. Yeah. They've stolen a point. They've stolen the win there. But realistically, I think it was no less than they deserved.
No, I thought they were a better team throughout, actually. Let's talk about United's equaliser as well, because I think that shows where the weaknesses are for Brighton. It was a lovely move from Manchester United, to be fair. The first element was Xerxes and Rashford. They made some really nice decoy runs in behind, and suddenly Brighton's defence, because Maguire had the ball and they thought that was going to go over the top, Brighton's defence was in a bit of disarray. So they weren't really focused then when Maguire... And it was Maguire, Mazraoui, Mainu on that right-hand side. They made a lovely little combination. And then you see that ball go through to Amad Diallo, who's in behind. Drives into the box. Now, Diallo's, for me, has to do better with a chance. It goes in the goal, obviously. Yeah. But it did take it wasn't a great effort. It took a huge deflection off Van Hecke. But and while the finish wasn't great, I think it was a deserved goal because the move was really good. They picked apart Brighton quite easily down that right-hand side of what looked quite easily. And obviously they got the goal that they warranted from that. But it does show that slight weakness. If you do lose that 1v1 battle in the full-back area, Brighton can be opened up. And I do think they will have a little bit of some issues with that this season. But they did well.
It's definitely something that Brighton will need to address, because you think that, how many teams in the Premier League are so dangerous out wide that if they lose, Brighton could find themselves losing that battle, more often than not, and suddenly they'll be in big trouble, because then they're going to start losing games because of it. So they've just got to watch that. Diallo, he got foot. It's one of those. It's a weird one, isn't it? It misses a clear-cut opportunity in the first half, and then in the second half he gets a more difficult opportunity, but it still goes in the back of the net. Yeah. So he'll take the goal. It was savable without the deflection, so a bit of a let-off, but United deserve the goal. Realistically, they played some nice football to merit the strike.
Yeah, and obviously the same sort of thing happened with the Garnacho chance. It was really nice football down the right-hand side. They cut it across the box. Garnacho should have scored, really. It went in the back of the net. Xerxes got a touch on it and it was offside. I think people are arguing that, it would have gone in anyway, so it doesn't matter. It's bizarre. That's the rule. You can't really argue with the rules, can you? They are the rules.
I can understand it's a frustrating one for United, but the rules are the rules. When VAR doesn't be consistent, people moan. When it is consistent, people moan. So
we can't just give goals because it would have gone in anyway.
Yeah, every offside goal it would have gone in anyway because it went in. So it's one as in
Garnacho's shot would have gone in. So without it doesn't matter.
Xerxes touched it. It was Xerxes' goal technically. So
it was. And he was touched before it went over the line. João Pedro's goal then, the winner for Brighton. Terrible defending from Manchester United. The ball goes into the back post, and Pedro's just in acres. Yeah. You look at that chance, and Maguire's just stood there. I mean, Maguire and Martinez were marking each other in there.
Yeah.
And that was just terrible defending. And then obviously João Pedro heads it into the back post, completely unmarked. lovely goal. And it felt for both goals, Onana was completely stranded because Welbeck was in acres after a simple pass across the box, and João Pedro was in acres after a cross into the box. United still have a lot to figure out defensively, but Brighton were very good at opening up those weaknesses, exposing those weaknesses, and obviously scoring goals as a result. So, yeah, really good game for Brighton. The other thing I want to touch on before we talk about next week, Rashford and another really difficult performance for Marcus Rashford. He just really struggled to have any sort of impact on the game.
I don't get how he can keep starting. I do not understand how Ten Hag can keep putting Rashford in this United side. Clearly, he is not playing well enough at the moment to demand a place in a Manchester United starting 11. It is beyond me. It's like Ten Hag is choosing to play with 10 players every week because Rashford might as well not be there. Once again on Saturday, it was a frustrating performance. He didn't get in the game. He didn't impact the game. It was absolutely pointless him being there. And I'm still stunned that he still plays.
Yeah, he was hooked after 65 minutes. I thought Garnacho immediately came on and had a bigger impact than Rashford had in the first 65. Rashford had caught offside twice in those 65 minutes. Obviously, 2 of those 6 offsides that United were drawn by that Brighton high line. But yeah, he just didn't really do anything. You look at his stats, he just did nothing. He couldn't stay outside. He didn't really get involved in the game. He doesn't offer any sort of direct... I think Garnacho is much more direct, much more of a goal threat, a chance creator. Rashford offers nothing at the moment, and you've got to question why the stubbornness from Ten Hag to continue starting him when the numbers aren't there, the underlying numbers aren't there, the performances aren't there. There's just nothing encouraging about Marcus Rashford right now. I don't get it. I just don't get it.
Yeah, it's a shame to see because we know how good Marcus Rashford can be. We know that,
Well, do we?
We know
we've not seen him do anything for a good 3-4 years now.
Yeah, but you got I think 3-4 years.
I mean,
harsh, but
since he broke out in 2017 under Van Gaal, he had a good couple seasons. A few injuries, of course, in 2020. I think that's definitely hurt him in 2021, but. He's just not had that level. He's never had any consistency. There's a couple good games here and there, but there's not been any consistency for Rashford for so long now.
Yeah, I mean, it's overall we know how good he can be, but it's just not been there. I would be very surprised. I mean, Garnacho's got me thinking, what can I do in this team? Same with Matthias de Ligt. I mean, he must have watched the car crash defensively and gone, I must be in... There are so many players... I don't understand it from Ten Hag, because for me, if all 3 of Garnacho, Xerxes and de Ligt should start the next game. And if they don't, what's the point in them being there? Because they must look at it and laugh. Garnacho must be surprised at how on earth he's benched over Rashford. Xerxes must go, I've scored a goal and I've looked good in the second game. How am I not starting? And de Ligt watched the absolute shambles that was the defence against Brighton. He must be thinking, why am I here? I'm not going to play.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see what he does. We'll go on to next week then, Manchester United versus Liverpool. I'll be intrigued to see what Ten Hag does because it's a very, very difficult match. We look how good Liverpool look very good in the first 2 game weeks. They've not conceded a goal yet. They've scored twice in both matches. They look a decent side. I think slot system's clearly working out. But United are set up in a way that can hurt Liverpool. When you have a possession-based side, a side that want to camp in your half and play very high, play very aggressively, it does mean you have that transitional threat. And if you look at players like Alejandro Garnacho, Amad Diallo, there is a lot of pace, a lot of transitional threat there. Xerxes, Fernandes, Mount can do that same sort of thing as well. So I think they can hurt Liverpool on Sunday if they want to. They've got to be able to generate those transitions and get in behind.
It's always a hard one because you're spot on. United are set up very well.
But then they should have done that against Brighton.
Yeah. The other problem is that players like Mo Salah and Jota will quite literally walk through the back line if they play like they did against Brighton. And then it'll be a field day. I mean, we've seen some crazy Man United Liverpool games. We saw the 4-3 in the FA Cup. We saw the 6-0 in the league. Or was it 7-0? I can't remember how many goals it was.
7, I think.
But who knows what you're going to get. But realistically, Liverpool, it's Old Trafford, which might help, maybe.
Oh, they lost 7-0 there once. But
they did. But they also won 4-3 there, so who knows?
True. I don't think United... I don't think it'll be bad for United against Liverpool. I don't think the way Liverpool play now is necessarily suited to beating United by a high scoreline. You look at the 7-0 game, and it's because they were able to transition so quickly.
Yeah.
And United are terrible defending transitions. We've known that for years now, and it's partly because you've got Casemiro, and it's partly because you've got Maguire, and it all just falls apart. When you think about Liverpool, probably the best example of a transitional team that have been right at the top level under Jurgen Klopp for years. Obviously now they're going to play a possession-based style, but if Ten Hag is looking to go transitional with how he plays, then they've got to get elite players in certain positions. Because you look at Liverpool and they had the crucial parts with Van Dijk, with Fabinho and Alisson. And it's the same sort of thing as Arsenal right now with Rice, with Saliba and with Raya. Because you're putting so many players forward, you've got to have the players in the key defensive areas that can sort of wipe up any messes.
Yeah.
Like Liverpool conceded so few goals despite playing so high and only lost a handful of matches in that 2020 campaign. I think it was only one when it's that Watford team. I think that's the only loss they had.
Yeah.
Maybe a couple of us towards the end of the season. But they were very good in that year, despite the fact they were quite open in defensive areas because they sent both fullbacks forward. But because of their defensive players being able to be so key, they could be very aggressive. United at the moment are relying on... I think Martinez is okay, but he needs someone elite alongside him. I don't think he's an elite level defender.
No.
Casemiro is...
Past it,
in my opinion. His legs are very much gone and he doesn't seem to offer the same tactical stability. I think Ugarte will help that, and then we could see United become a really good transitional side. And with Onana, it's a weird one because at times he's a brilliant goalkeeper and makes outstanding saves, and at others, he looks completely lost in there.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think he's a very good goalkeeper, but he does have the tendency to make some big mistakes. And when you concede so many shots in total in this game, United conceded something like I think it was 14 shots. When you concede that number of shots, they are going to have a goalkeeper that does make a lot of saves. If not, they will concede goals.
It's one of those where I think there's a lot of promise and potential for Manchester United, but after only 2 games, yes, they beat Fulham, but after only 2 games, we're starting to see the same problems that we saw last season. I mean, the Fulham game was only 1-0 because Xerxes came on and scored a good goal. Apart from that game was crap.
They really couldn't. They couldn't break down Fulham of all teams.
And the Brighton game again was not good enough for Man United. Liverpool's a tough one, and then suddenly you've got 2 tough losses on the bounce, and then you're going into game week 4 up against it. They're already in the bottom half of the table, and I know it's only after 2 games, but it's that psychological thing that already gets at you.
Yeah.
Will already eat at you as a side that are struggling. You don't want to start the season with a struggle, but it looks like it could get rough for United.
Yeah, Liverpool will be an interesting one. I think if Ten Hag's good at coaching the big games. We saw that against City in the FA Cup final. Yeah. We saw it against Liverpool in the FA Cup semis. We saw it against United and against City in the Community Shield. Not that was of great importance, but he does coach around the big games. And I think against Liverpool, it'll be interesting to see whether he can beat Arne Slot, because I still have some doubts about Slot. So I think that'll be an interesting one. We'll probably be sat here analysing it in a week's time if it's an interesting scoreline, if United win or Liverpool score 7. So look out for that. But yeah, I guess we'll see. On Brighton's next game, Arsenal coming up, probably the biggest test of the season, I think, other than Man City, is Arsenal away for Brighton. It's a good early test for Hurzeler. If they get absolutely rolled over here, because they played Everton and United. Everton look crap at the moment. I'm really worried about them. I think they might finally go down. And United always are a team that Brighton have always beaten them. They've won 5 out of the last 6 meetings between the 2 sides, I think. So they've been very good. And they're all... United are always prone to losing in a game they should be winning. So that's going to be interesting to see. I think with Brighton up against Arsenal, it's a big test of Hurzeler. They can't afford to lose huge here.
Yeah.
Even if they do lose, they've got to make a game of it. Because if not, I think a lot of people will start to realise actually that it was a bit of a faux start to the season for Brighton, and actually when they play sides of good quality, they'll get hammered. So I'll be intrigued. I really like Hurzeler. I really like what he's doing. Will it translate to Arsenal? Will he be able to adapt it to Arsenal? That's the big question coming up this weekend.
As long as they don't get battered, it's a free hit. If they only lose 1 or 2-0, then you just go fair enough, Arsenal are a better football team. If they win, then suddenly that is a huge result, and it's like, okay, what is it this Brighton super team's, but one to watch out for.
They have got brilliant players.
Just don't get battered. They cannot afford to get battered.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the Brighton team this season. I think they will finish high. Unless people start to figure out Hurzeler, which, to be fair, I predicted, when we did our predictions, I said Brighton will be in the Champions League spots at Christmas.
Yeah.
And then we'll drop down the table because people will figure out Hurzeler. I still think that might happen, but the early signs here are positive for Brighton. They've spent a lot of money on a lot of good players. They've built a really decent team, a really strong team, actually, for Hurzeler. I think he's a really good manager as well. So, yeah, things are all very positive at the moment for Brighton. Yes, they might lose Billy Gilmour, but I think with Baleba, with Hinshelwood, with Mats Vifer, they've probably got enough players there. Ferdi Kadioglu's not even played for them yet, and I think that adds so much at left back as someone who can come inside like Josh Hinshelwood did and form those 2 sixes, but also be a nice out wide threat, also be a good one-on-one defender. Everything's looking great at the moment for Brighton. I'd love, shout out to all the Brighton fans. You must be loving life right now.
Yeah.
So get involved in the comments. Tell us what your thoughts are on your recent performances. But that is everything from us today. I think it was a good game from Brighton, a good win. And Arsenal coming up is a big test. Should be interesting though. But yeah, that is everything. If you want to watch more of our content, there's going to be a video on screen now. That was on Monday where we looked at Leandro Trossard. So if you Brighton fans want to know what Arsenal are bringing this season, then go and check that video out. But that's everything from us today. Thank you guys very, very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.